Hello humans and other species, I'm Batsy, your friendly local bat. Some of you might know me for the countless YouTube videos I have done about the Create mod this last year, which includes a ton of tutorials and schematics. Others might remember me by the awesome SMP where I play with my supporters, and that you could join too by becoming a Tier 2 fawn. One common problem I have seen over the months is that sometimes basic concepts of Create get lost in a sea of mechanics and interactions. Schematics become so efficient and complex that it's hard to understand every little step along the way. And even videos that are made to learn specific interactions, it still becomes hard to know what those mechanics could be used for. It's like teaching someone very specific techniques about fishing when they don't even know how to fish in the first place. So, in this episode, we will learn how to use the tools that Create provides. But we will do so through simple and practical examples. It's also good to know that I'm currently using the engineer's goggles. This will provide us with various information depending on what machine we are looking at. So whenever you see information being displayed on screen in a bubble like this, know that the goggles are doing that for us. With all of that out of the way, our goal today is to make gold with all of the steps that will require. And it all begins here with the power generators. In order for Create to function, we will need rotational power, and for that, we have various options. A decently efficient way to generate rotation is the windmill. It requires a windmill bearing, a chassis, and some sails to work. The sails don't need to be placed in a specific way. There is no wind mechanic to take into account. As long as there are sails connected to the bearing, it will start spinning for us. Depending on the amount of sails we use, it will generate more or less stress units, which are the units used by Create to determine the power generation and consumption. Next, we have the water wheels, a favorite choice for most players given that it only requires wood and a small amount of andesite alloys to make. It's also a lot easier to set up. It only requires to have one of its sides with flowing water, and that will give a set amount of stress units, depending on the size of the water wheel. The last choice and the most efficient one for the mid towards late game are the steam engines. So far, we have been able to achieve cheap and modest amounts of power, with the best option being the windmill with up to 8,000 units generated at maximum size. While steam engines range from 2,000 all the way to 147,000 units in normal configurations and up to 295,000 units when superheated. That's a very impressive number considering the compact nature of the steam engine. So it makes sense when it becomes the most obvious solution. Steam engines do require a bit more setup to work, so let's take a little look at how to make one ourselves. With the use of the goggles, we can check all of the information about the boiler, and it's worth noting that even if they look connected, these are 3 different boilers for 3 different small steam engines. With the information provided, we know that a boiler made of 4 fluid tanks is the smallest size possible. It's also receiving the lowest amount of heat, provided by any of these 3 passive heat sources. While the campfires will never provide any more heat, the blaze burner can use various fuels to increase its production. And then we can go even further by superheating it. Today we won't be needing that much power, so since we have the amount of heat required, all that's left is to provide the boiler with some water. In order for the boilers to have enough water for the smallest setup, we need a pump on each boiler with a speed of at least 32 RPM. That's a problem because the water wheels that we are using are only giving us a rotational speed of 8 RPM, something that we can see with the help of the speedometer. One of the components of Create is the cogwheels. We can use the basic principles of a gearbox, for example, the simple one in a bike. Using that principle, we can add a bigger cog at the source of the rotation, and when attaching a smaller cog onto it, that will speed things up. In the case of the Create mod, it always doubles the rotational speed, or reduce it in half if we were doing it the other way around. We have done it once, so that doubled our speed to 16 RPM. We can do it again to reach the desired 32 RPM. And with a couple of gearboxes and cogwheels to transfer the rotation into the pump, that's how we get enough water in the boilers. This is going to produce 2,000 stress units each, at a constant speed of 16 RPM. The amount of power is nice, but we want this to be much faster. The maximum speed we can achieve is 256 RPM, and there is a very cool way to achieve said speed in a rather small space. We know that we can add a big cogwheel on the source of the rotation, attached to a smaller one to double our speed. Now that the small one is the source of the rotation, we can attach a big cogwheel on its side. Then we cover the old cogwheel we used, which will prevent the connection on the side of it. That way, we can now add a small cogwheel in its place, doubling our speed again and not messing things up by connecting it to the previous ones. We can repeat this same process as many times as we need to. Now we can see on the speedometer that we are working with 256 RPM, which is the maximum speed, and we still have all of the 6,000 stress units. Of course, if we can afford it, we can always place down a speed controller and adjust the speed that way. There's a little panel at the front where we can adjust the speed we want, but now comes the interesting part. A speed controller has two different parts that rotate. Depending on which one is connected to the source of the rotation, we will be adjusting the speed of the opposite side. In our case, we have connected the source at the big cogwheel at the top, which means that the controller is redirecting the rotation to the bottom part, and that one is the part that we are reducing to 128 RPM. The range is from 1 to 256 RPM, but this time, it allows for much higher precision, letting us choose any number between that range. We can also choose what direction we want the rotation to go. This concludes the portion of power generation. Now let's take a look at some of the logistics. This is a small cobble generator, something that is part of the vanilla game too. When flowing lava touches flowing water, it creates stone or cobblestone depending on how they are aligned. With Create, we can automate the process by adding some drills to destroy the stone for us and a series of belts to gather all of the products. Right now the drills are offline because we are using a clutch to power them off. This is a very useful way of disabling the machines that we are currently not using. That prevents them from using stress units or even lag our worlds if there are many machines running. Once we flick the lever, the drills will immediately start working. We can also notice how the stressometers just changed, signaling that we are now consuming 3,000 of the stress units we have. This is a very useful tool for obvious reasons. Not only will we be able to know how much stress we have left for our machines, but in case we are running a more complex farm and it stops working, sometimes it's not so obvious if there is something else going on or the machine is simply overstressed. Use the goggles or stressometers often, and you will never have those issues. Now that we are producing some cobblestone, we want to move it to store it somewhere. In this setup, we are using a chute to grab the cobblestone that is generated by the drills, which will deposit said cobble on the belts below. But having this many belts is a bit much, but thankfully for us, we can make use of tunnels to deal with that problem. There are two types of funnels, the andesite and brass tunnels. The andesite tunnels are cheaper, but also have fewer features. We can notice how these tunnels aren't connecting together. Since the middle tunnel doesn't have an exit, all of the cobble is getting stuck there because it's unable to use the bottom one as the output. In the case of the brass tunnels, we can connect several of them to fuse the lines into one. These blocks are also here for a reason. Regardless if there is a belt or not, the tunnel will spit items through that exit unless we block it with something, and in this case, we're using a block for that, or there would be items on the floor. We can also create connections on the side of the tunnels, and with the same method that we use to fuse several lines into one, we can convert one line into many. Of course, we can always use some well-placed belts to achieve the same result. Funnels are another tool to help us move items around, and we also have both the andesite and brass variants, with the andesite being the cheaper variant with fewer features. Unlike the tunnels, the funnels are used as a tool to work between inventories. In our case, we want to take all of the cobblestone from the belts and insert it into the barrel. There's also a second funnel to extract the items from that same barrel to deposit them on the belt. Funnels are always about connecting things up. Andesite funnels cannot be filtered, and they will output a single item at a time, but they will still take any stack with input into them. We can throw an entire stack of cobble right now, and it will take it all with no problem. This is a good way to cut corners and make the farm cheaper. While the brass funnels have a slot that we can use to filter a certain item. We can also use the filters provided by Create to specify further what things can move forward. The list filter is a simple filter where we can add up to 18 different items in it, and we can choose it to either be set as allowed or denied. That will depend on whether we want to prevent some items from going through or only allow certain things. The attribute filter also can be set to allowed or denied, but this one will work with tags and attributes. We can use the sand on my inventory as a base template. When adding it to the filter, it will display the attributes that sand can have. In this case, it shows that it can be washed, it can be haunted, and other useful things. We will see later some useful ways to apply these features. But first, let's see what else funnels can do. By having a redstone signal directly on the funnel, we can prevent any items from going through. This means for both inputs and outputs. If we remove the signal from these funnels, the cobble will start to fill the belts again, but these funnels are still locked, so nothing will go through until we say so. It can be any redstone signal, so this opens a lot of possibilities when it comes to handling items. Something else we can notice is that even though the brass funnel can move an entire stack at a time, both funnels are still limited at a lower rate than what the belt allows. This is even more obvious when we move the belt at a maximum speed. Funnels have a set rate at which they work, but there is a peculiar interaction that lets us bypass that. When a funnel gets unlocked, it will spit an item at the very first tick it cans, and it will get limited to its natural rate after that. This means that if we use a couple of observers, for example, we can turn it on and off repeatedly to increase the rate at which works by forcing it to spit items every time it unlocks. We can also make use of the latches added by 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬 to make the fastest ticking circuit that Minecraft allows. And with it, we can pretty much fill the entire belt with items. This can be very useful in case we don't want to use several belts, but we need to handle higher rates on a farm or something. We have learned a lot about power generation and 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬 logistics. Now it's time to make use of that knowledge in a practical setting. We are currently generating cobblestone, and we want to transform it into gold. The first step we want to do is to convert said cobblestone into gravel, and we can achieve that by crushing it. We are going to use a funnel to extract the items from the vault, some belts to move it towards a millstone, and, well, the same millstone to crush it into gravel. You can notice here that we can also make the belts go up and down, something particularly useful in this next step, because we need to crush down the gravel again to make sand. A millstone is not the only thing that can crush things. We can also use the crushing wheels. In fact, there are certain materials that can only be crushed by a crushing wheel. A small millstone isn't enough. Using the same technique with the belts, we can move the gravel upwards into the chute about the wheels. That will make it go down and get crushed into sand. Then it will fall into the belt to continue forward. Crushing down gravel will convert it into sand, but it also has flint and clay as a side product. We don't want the flint, so we can use the technique with the tunnels to extract the flint from the side. By adding a filter in the tunnel, we will make sure that only flint goes through this one, but it could still go through the rest, in case this exit was blocked. Thankfully, we can use filter to deny flint from going through it. Or we could do the opposite and only allow the sand and clay. We can store all of that flint, in case we want it for something else, or we can simply make a system to burn all of the side products we don't want. The next thing we want to do is to wash all that sand to process it into clay. This is fairly simple. All we need is an encased fan and water between the fan and the items. Waterlogging the same block where the items are also works and makes it for a more compact setup. But we want the sand to stay here until it gets processed into clay. For that, we can use a simple filter to only allow clay through the funnel. Or with the use of the attribute filter, we can take the sand, use for example the attribute that can be washed, and set it to deny. That means that anything that can be washed will remain here until it gets processed. That would allow us to use this washing section for more than just to make clay. Now we can let the clay continue forward, and with the use of a tunnel, we can reduce it back to one single belt. That will make things easier to move our clay into a basin where it's getting packed by a press to create clay blocks. For this setup, the basin has its own output that will deposit the items on the next belt. This will only work if the basin is set to craft one single thing, and it will prevent any other material from going through. In case we need to craft more stuff, we can set a filter in the basin instead of a single block, but then we would need a funnel in front of the basin to make sure that random items don't go through. Now that we have clay blocks, we want to convert them into terracotta, which can be achieved by smelting said clay. That can be done on a furnace, or in the case of 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬, we can use the encased fan again, but with some lava instead. We cannot add lava on the same block as the funnel, so we do need to add it on the side this time. And because we are only making terracotta here, we can simply add the terracotta block directly as the filter for the funnel. With that terracotta, we want to crush it down to produce red sand. And it's as simple as to repeat what we did before with the millstone. This time we don't even need to move the belts up and down. And as the last step, we want to wash all of the red sand. That will give us the gold nuggets that we were looking for, but it will also give us some dead bushes as a side product. We will be washing the sand with the same setup as we used before, and we will use a filter on the funnel so only the gold nuggets get stored. That leaves us the issue of the dead bushes. Thankfully, we can add a second funnel on the side of the belt at the exact same spot where we are washing the sand, so the bushes get extracted and dumped into the lava. And this is how we go from generating cobblestone all the way to gold nuggets. 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬 has a lot of interesting ways to process items and a lot of things that can be automated. Knowing each one of its components is key to create something as cool as what we just did today, but it also becomes very simple when you understand each of its parts. This video was a bit different, but I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Hopefully the humans learn the basics required to create amazing farms, and I would so love to see what you are all able to achieve with it. I have a Discord server where anyone is welcome to share their creations, and I often make videos about the 𝐋𝐢𝐬𝐬 mod, so do make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on those. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.